Hey, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about creating a winning title. Why are titles important? Because a lot of times they're the only thing that people actually read. So let's imagine that you're going to a conference and you got this little booklet and it's, slick and it came in a bag full of stuff that you'll never use. And you open it up and what's the first thing you do? You skim through the titles, right? Nobody's forcing you to go to their talk. Like you may just want to dip out and go to the bar or something. But I'm not saying that's what I do at conferences. I'm just saying that people do that. And so anyway, so you scan through the titles, right? And so titles are the thing that capture people's attention. And so they got to be good, right? Like a lot of people in this class tend to write titles as an afterthought, and they end up with titles like plants or working with cows. These are real titles that I've seen, by the way. And they were really terrible. And so let's see here. This is my quiz for you. Titles don't matter. It's the content that matters, right? False. Titles advertise your material. They set up the audience's expectations and they generate interest. And just to give you a funny story, whenever I worked at Virginia Tech, we had this one professor who was a bit of like a celebrity on campus. He used to be a comedian, actually, and I can't remember his name right now, but he actually had an HBO special, so he's kind of a big deal. And he, on his first gig, set up a workshop at a local conference there in Blacksburg at the conference center. And he wanted to sound legit. And so he gave it like a really boring academic-y sounding title. And he called it something like, using improvisational humor praxis in the classroom for large classrooms, or something really terrible and pedantic like that, right? And he had 8 people show up, and it was a great talk. Like, he's of course brilliant and funny, and knows all about using improvisational humor in the classroom, but the title sucked, and so only 8 people show up. And so the next year he's a little more confident, and he was like, you know what, I'm just going to call it something good. And so he named it Whose Class Is It Anyway, which for those of you who are young is a riff off of the show Whose Line Is It Anyway. It was popular. I'm really old, that's what I'm saying. Anyway, and just by changing the title, I think he called it like Whose Class Is It Anyway, using humor in the classroom to not suck or something. And he had 175 people show up, and they had to move it to the ballroom, and the only thing that he changed was the title. So titles are important. Don't skimp on them. So here's some tips for creating a winning title. Use action verbs. That's like verbs that end in ing to convey that we're going to be doing something, okay? In the class, which is better than plants, which is just a noun. Be concise, brief, and to the point, which is funny because those all three mean the same thing. So it's like redundant. Use the title to create interest in your program, and it can be different than your paper. And that's actually, I use this PowerPoint for something else. Just ignore that. So I'm a big fan of the academic-y sounding title where you do something that's catchy and then put a colon at the end of it and then give a more descriptive name, okay? And so it could be something like, God, I'm really bad at coming up with things on the spot. I'll come back to it. But so just generally know that if you convey that you're going to be doing something so that they can read it and they think, oh, this is what's going to happen in this class. This is the thing that I'm going to learn about. And if it's clever or it's at the very least descriptive, then it'll be better than plants or working with cows. All right, step number 4. And notice that like organizing the body content is the 4th step that we've come to, okay? And so what you're going to do in this, whenever you think about like the big question in this step is to think about what to put in and what to take out. And the way that you do that is you go back to your objectives. Remember the objectives that you theoretically wrote, where you say, I want to accomplish these things. The audience is going to be able to describe the 4 steps to avert a nuclear holocaust, or like do the 4 steps, or whatever they are. So think about those and then work backwards. And you're like, all right, to get to that end, what do I need to cover? Okay. And so we have an acronym for everything in this class. And so we use the BEAR method of determining what to leave in. And so we ask ourselves first, is it beneficial to the audience? Okay. So is like this section going to benefit them? Is it going to help us, achieve our goal? Is each independent? Okay. So you don't have like things that overlap. Like, do you have different sections of the speech that like stand alone and are like new information versus like things that are redundant. So Is it adequately explainable in the time allowed? All right. So this is the thing that I've seen actually happen in class where people, they try to be epic. This is like one of my advice to you on step number 4 is don't be epic. All right. Choose something that you can accomplish in the like 9 to 12 minutes or whatever it is that you have to accomplish, like do the speech in this class. And so I've seen people that were like, I'm going to go over like the steps to hiking, and we're going to talk about how to avert bears, and we're going to talk about how to set up a tent, and we're going to talk about like how to like boil water to, kill protozoans. And like, it's just, they're just trying to cover too much. And so think about like what you can reasonably accomplish. And then the last one is it relevant to the written objective, right? Because sometimes things are really interesting. Sometimes they fit within the time span, but do they have any bearing on what you're trying to accomplish? And if the answer is no, then they go out. Because otherwise, we've all been in speeches where they tell us something and we're like, why the hell did they just tell us that? That has no bearing on the stuff. Anyway, there you go, the bear method. Now with the training demo, which we'll talk more about soon, we actually, you're teaching them how to do something. So it's pretty straightforward, and we do that speech first on purpose. And so it's like, here are the 5 steps to do the thing, and then you do them. But for your informational talk and your persuasive talk, it gets a little bit more difficult, right? So here are some ways to think about ordering your speech. It could be chronological, like if you're just giving information on something that happened. It could be problem solution if you're just telling about like, like a crisis or a thing that people face in agriculture. Could be advantages, disadvantages. If you're just trying to, like people do this a lot with hot topic things like GMOs or horse slaughter or whatever. They're just like, here are some good things, here are some bad things. That's totally okay. There's an old way, new way. If you're selling something, feature and benefits like a good way to do it, right? So like, here's the new thing that we sell, and here's what makes it special, and here's how it'll benefit you. And so that's a good way to organize it. And then, of course, the scientific method, if you're doing like a researchy talk, obviously people sometimes expect that. Probably won't use that in this class, but you never surprise me. You never know. Don't pay attention to that slide. Sorry. All right, cool. So you notice that I didn't spend a lot of time on this organizing the body business. And that's because your speeches are so varied that you're really going to have to think through this yourself. And so remember going back to our 5 characteristics, like how do we organize the content in a way that is clear so that it flows logically and linearly towards some like goal that we've laid out at the beginning of the talk. Okay. All right, step 5. So develop a plan for visuals. Here's a quick question for you. How many types of visuals should you even have in your talk? And by visuals, I mean PowerPoints, I mean handouts, like anything that's not you talking is a visual, okay? And so the answer is more than one, okay? Because typically what people do, and you've seen this at every lecture you've ever been to, is they show up and they're like, I made a PowerPoint. Ooh, Also, that picture is really awkward. Anyway, but people learn in different ways. And the more ways that you can convey information, the better, right? The more channels of like communication that you have going. And so people tend to learn, from seeing and hearing better than they do just from seeing or just from hearing alone. I think yes, I do. Look at this. 10% of people will remember 10% of they read, 7% of what they hear, and 87% of what they see and hear, according to some science. Somebody always points out that doesn't add up. And I'm like, I know, idiots. This is... Sorry, I'm not actually a mean person, but I'm like, come on, man, like, let's use our heads here. Also, the pie graphs are not to scale. But so that the combination of reading and hearing or, seeing and hearing has a multiplier effect. And that's why you end up, if you can see it and hear it at the same time in the same speech, then you end up with better outcomes and people remember what you said. It's also a good way to show that you're professional. If you do it well, if you do a really terrible PowerPoint, you won't look professional, and that actually detracts from things. But if you do it well, it really can help to convey, your professionalism and credibility. So imagine if you show up to give a talk and you've got no PowerPoint or no visuals at all. They've only got you to base, the speech on. But if you show up and you've put together a decent PowerPoint and you've used a theme and it looks sharp, that automatically lends some credibility because it looks snazzy. So anyway, some things to think about. So what are some types of visuals that you can use? So most everybody has used projector and PowerPoint, right? If you haven't, if you're not adept at PowerPoint, we're actually going to have an assignment later in the semester that helps you become familiar with every feature of PowerPoint. But you may also use a whiteboard and chalkboard. Like sometimes that's interesting. Sometimes it's really annoying to watch you be like, what is he going to write? He's writing so slow. But it is like a good thing that you can use. You can also use flip chart. Oops, sorry. I guess I got flip chart down here somewhere, maybe. Anyway, you also have handouts. People love handouts, right? So like you like make like a thing with just the basics, or maybe you've got, a map or a graph or something that has too much detail for you to put on the screen and they need to study it, and you can hand those out. So that's really cool. You also got props. Like whenever I used to teach this class like in person, I would show up with a box and I would set the box on the table and I would keep looking into the box periodically, and like it would hold everybody's attention because they're all like, what's in the box? Like in that movie with Brad Pitt. Anyway, and then, of course, the box is empty. I'm like, there's nothing in the box. But, like, when people bring props, they're like, oh, my God, that thing that I wouldn't care about in any other facet of my life has suddenly become interesting. And so whenever you bring props, it really adds something to your talk. And so, of course, in your training demo, when you're teaching them how to do a thing, like preferably with their hands, you're going to end up with props. So that's the thing. You can always have pictures. You can pass them around. You can put them on the screen. You can use videos in this class, although your videos should be really fairly short, okay? Because this is a speech class in which we evaluate your ability to give a speech. And if you're like, I got a 12-minute talk and I'm going to show a 9-minute video, I'm going to give you like, 90%. I don't even know how that math works out. But you see what I'm saying? Like, I can't grade you based on your ability to give a talk when you just sort of like had the video do the talk for you, okay? The other thing that you can use is dot cams and transparency. Some people use that. And then, of course, graphs are really cool, too. All right, so I would ordinarily have you do an activity where we talk about the pluses and minuses of these things, but I'm going to go over them with you. Oh, first, wait, let's watch this. This is my favorite GIF ever. This is how to make graphs not suck, okay? And so people tend to use, like, templates, and they make it really terrible, and it's got too much clutter. And in general, the more minimal you can be, the better. Look, now we're supposed to be looking at bacon, and we can tell that because it looks like a red strip of bacon, all right? And we keep taking away things, and it keeps getting better. So this is just my, Truth to the Youth campaign of here's how to make graphs better because the world is full of terrible graphs. Look at that. Before and after. Ready? Before, after. Now we know what we're supposed to be seeing. Bacon's important. All right, let's move on. So some things for visuals. All right, we have the kiss and kill method because we're violent in this class, apparently. So kisses, keep it short and simple, of course. This is like generally thinking in terms of PowerPoint or flip chart. Remember that your visuals are not supposed to take the place of your talk. They're supposed to augment it, all right? And so we've all been to lectures where the teacher comes out and he's like, please read this paragraph that I put on the PowerPoint, or they put it up and then they're like, I'm going to read this thing that I put up on the PowerPoint for you, and I cut it straight out of some research paper that I wrote, and it's almost unintelligible. And so that's bad, right? So the rule of sixes down there at the bottom is that, and it's not like anybody's going to be counting, but the rule of sixes is that you have no more than 6 points on a slide and no more than 6 words per slide. And that kind of forces you to keep it fairly succinct. And you're just like sort of putting up, bullet points to help yourself, follow along, kind of like note cards on the screen, and also to help your audience follow along, and just sort of like main points. So that you're not just like reading chunks of text, because that's terrible, because nobody can read that anyway. The other thing is keep it large and legible. I don't know that like there's an exact number, but I would say for most of your words on your PowerPoints, you don't want to go below 20 point font, because it gets too small and people can't read it from the back, and it always looks great on the screen, but like imagine what it's going to be blown up and viewing it from like 25 feet away. So good. All right, cool. Let's see where we're at on time. Okay, I'm going to stop, and we're going to do this step 6 in a new video.